Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first Impero webinar of 2022, and welcome to you, Morten, as well. We have a few technical difficulties, so you won't be able to see Morten today, but he is with us as well. We're just going to wait a couple of minutes for the last participants to join before we get started. All right, let's get started. So, welcome, everyone. Today's webinar is about getting your compliance processes right, building strong compliance processes. So today we have Morten Christensen, the Head of Customer Success, and myself, Shanna Rasmussen, the Business Development Director. We have half an hour to take you through our Impero platform. Before we do so, perhaps Morten, you can quickly introduce yourself.
Yeah, I can do that, and thank you for that, Shanna. My name is Morten Christensen. I've been a part of Impero for a bit more than 6 years now. I am heading our customer success team, meaning that I know a lot about the small details around the solution, and I know a lot about the different use cases of Impero.
Brilliant, thank you, Morten. And as for myself, one of the business development directors, really focusing on making sure that we get some customers on board, but likewise making sure that we have happy customers. So the agenda for the webinar today is to take you through, say at a high level, what is Impero really and how can it help you build strong and robust compliance processes. So before we let you into the actual platform, Impero in essence is a simple, easy to use compliance management platform. Consists of, say, 3 main modules: a risk management module where you identify and you evaluate your risks, your control management module where you design your controls and you attach them to roles, responsibilities, and a given frequency to which you want your control to be performed. And then you have your reporting module that basically help you to easily monitor and follow up, making sure that controls are performed in a timely manner and as intended. So this is now where Morten will really take you through what does that actually mean in practical terms, so you can get a look and feel of what Impero is. We have the opportunity to ask any questions as and when we go along with the webinar, so please feel free to write the questions and we will answer them as and when we go along. And we'll also hold some time at the end of the webinar to answer any questions that we didn't do during the webinar. And then at the end, we will also talk to you about our upcoming webinars. So Morten, it's the start of the new year. We really want to get things right. So we really want to make sure that we build these robust compliance processes. Perhaps you can talk about how Impero can help us do so.
Hopefully, and thank you for that, Shanna. So let's jump straight in. So basically, this year, what you see, at least right now on the screen, is the entrance to Impero. So basically, this is our webinar solution here, but every single one of our clients, of course, have their own environment. So what I do here is I basically sign in using my username and password. In this case here, we also support single sign-on, two-factor authentication, etc. What we see right now here on the screen is Impero, and as Shanna mentioned, then what we'll go through first here is that we'll jump basically straight into our risk management solution, at least in short. Then we'll talk a little bit about controls, reporting, and then we'll talk just very briefly around, well, how do I actually manage a solution that's up and running? Some of you might be in organizations with a lot of employees. So that's sort of the journey. Shanna will help me guide a little bit through today here as well. But let's kick things off here in the risk management. We also do in-depth webinar. We'll hold a bit on that at the end as well, on risk management as a topic. So today we'll just talk about a little bit about the basics of the different elements of Impero. So what we see here is basically what we call the risk map. So essentially, we've had there are some risks that has been predefined. Of course, you can do that on your own, and you can tailor them any way you'd like. And you could decide, well, is this a risk we have in all of our companies, or is it something we have in a subset of our companies, or is it even a local risk that only applies for a single company? So basically, what we see here is a list of risks. Now, given my current access rights, I have access to both Impero AS, DK in Germany, Sweden, and so on here. But in a more real-life example, it might be that, well, I am supposed to address the risks that has been assigned to, let's say, a single entity. So we can decide in Impero who should have access to this entity here. We can decide, is it a view access where you can only see how you can see the evaluation? Is it an edit access where you or it's an edit access, sorry, where you can actually give a proper response. Right now, I have an edit access. So that means if I go down here, then within finance, within IT, then I can see the risks that has been assigned to the entity that I'm responsible for. So what I see here is how a basic risk in Impero is designed. So it consists of a name, a description, and as briefly mentioned, then we distinguish between whether it's a global or a local scope. Then we have some predefined out-of-the-box assertions. So here it's financial statement assertions that we have, and we have some objectives. This can be customized in anywhere you'd basically like. So that might be that, well, we are using a different framework, so we have different options, then we can adjust to that. And it might even be that, well, we actually have maybe a third or fourth dimension as well, which we also need to actually be able to filter and or report on this as well. So this is also an option to do that. But basically my task here as a risk owner is to say, well, what's the inherent values here? Again, per default, it goes for, at least for the impact, from very low to very high, and on the likelihood from remote to nearly certain. So essentially it's a 5x5 scale that we use, but we also support 3x3, 4x4, and so on. So let's say that the risk here is high, or the impact at least is high, and the likelihood is highly likely. The next we do here is that we basically set a response. So the default here will just be marked as none. But because we can mass assign our risks to multiple countries or companies at once, then it could actually be, well, then it's up to the different companies to evaluate whether this risk is actually applicable for them or not. So we have a not applicable option. It could be that we try to transfer, or we will transfer the risk through insurances or something like that. Maybe we try to simply avoid the risk, or we accept it, but it's too insignificant for us to actually do something about it. Of course, the most commonly one, at least in Impero use, is that we actually want to reduce this risk here. And as soon as I select reduce, you would see this little subsection here, where we can basically link it towards mitigating actions. Now I'll just link it towards a control here in Impero, where we can see the basic title and the description. We work at the risk coverage. It's possible to provide that as well if needed. Now I just added one control here, but it's possible to add multiple controls to reduce this risk. And of course, a control in Impero can also reduce multiple risks. All I then have to do is to, well, basically say, well, because we do these actions, then we say the impact might still be high if we haven't worked with that, but the likelihood of this action or this risk here to actually occur has now been reduced to unlikely. So now we basically have the entire sort of risk journey from, well, we have the inherent values here, we have what we do to reduce it, and then we have our residual values as well. And this we also show here in our heat map, where we basically plot in these values. What we see right now here is our inherent impact and inherent likelihood. Then I can toggle to see my residual view that, well, because we have mitigating actions in place, then this is actually the view that currently applies.
So at a high level, you have the opportunity to, first of all, identify your risk landscape at a given process, at a given theme. So it can either be finance, tax, regulatory requirements, etc. And then you have an understanding. It then takes you to your next, say, step, which is basically the control management. So which processes, which controls do you have in place to make sure that you mitigate these risks? Can you tell us more about that, Morten?
Yes, I can. So basically now you just saw a very brief appetizer on a control in Impero, but let's go to our control management here. So basically what I see here, and we call these, as you can see, we call these control programs. Essentially, these are small areas that we can define within Impero that would hold a subset of controls. So if we take financial controls here as an example, then we can see that's actually a control program, and it holds 22 controls. It's also on this level here we can define who should actually have access to what data. So it could be that I should have access here to finance, whereas for our month-end closing it should be someone else, or maybe for our tax programs here we would like to provide Shane with an access right here, and she should just be the admin of that, and then it's fairly easy to apply that across your entire control landscape here. So this is just how you basically define who can actually see what data. And if you have access, just as I have here, either as an admin or as an edit access, then I can basically edit the controls that are already in here. Of course, if I'm a control manager, then I can also define new ones. So let's just pick one here, and we'll just use a bank reconciliation here as a basic example. This is a financial control, but whether it's within finance, within tax, within IT, or something else, then it's basically the same engine that we built this on. It's the same building blocks. You'd see there might, of course, be some information that would differ a little bit. So a control in Impero consists of a name and a description, and this is a bit on a high level, as you can see here. Then we need to place it somewhere. So now we are placing it within the financial control program. And then we use something that we call tags, which is basically little stamps that we can actually provide on the controls. And then once again, and I'll show you that in the report section as well, we can actually filter based on, or even group our data based on these different tags here. Now these here are very finance and audit oriented, but if you have some parameters that only applies for your business area or for your company even, then you can actually create your own categories with your own tags, which means that it's possible to actually at least create the framework for the report that you actually need. This was the basic of so the title and the description and the overall values that we might want to filter or report upon. Then we have a scheduling section here, and I'll not go too much in detail with that, but in essence we could say, well, is this something we do on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, yearly, or so on. And then we decide, well, when is these controls or this control here actually due? So let's say, well, it's on the 5th business day after the end of the month. Because we're talking business day, well, then it equals the 7th of February, and we then basically again for reporting purposes we stamp it with a period that even though it's actually supposed to be submitted in February, it's actually regarding January data. Once again, much more on that when we dive into the reporting in a minute as well. The next part here is that we call it notification date. So basically, when do we want to notify the control performers that they have a pending action? So let's just say we want that 4 business days before the responsible due date, which means that here on February 1st at 7 o'clock in the morning, Central European time, we would basically notify through email to the assignees that we'll come to here in a second that there's a pending action and it's supposed to be due before the 7th of February. As you can see here, there's a lot of different input fields that we can change, and there's room here for a lot of flexibility. And I think we cover, if not all, then almost all recurrence types that you might have for your controls. The next section here is, well, now we've defined the basics, so the name and the description. We've also defined when it's supposed to be done. Now we'll talk a little bit about, well, who is actually supposed to do this, and I'll just remove the options that we already have. So it might be that I'm actually supposed to be responsible for this control here. We work with a reviewer and even a second review as well. Both of these are optional, so you can have a control that's structured just like this, where you say, well, it's Morten here, he's responsible. As soon as he has submitted his control, then it's done, it's all fine, and that's good. And then it might be that, well, we also have the exact same control, but it's running in a different company. Maybe it's Shanna who is supposed to do that. Then we can also add her. So basically, what happens here is that both Shanna and myself on February 1st will receive a notification that we are supposed to do this bank reconciliation, and we're supposed to do it no later than the 7th of February. But right now we don't have any real way of actually, besides our name, of course, to actually distinguish these options from each other. They will inherit basically all the data we have up here, so title, description, even the tags here will actually be inherent to both of our users. Of course, the scheduling is also the same, but we actually use, we call it assignment tags. We use the exact same library here once again and say, okay, Shanna is doing this for, let's say, Denmark. Maybe Denmark is company 100. And then Morten down here, well, he's doing the exact same action, but for company 300, which might be in, let's just say, Germany. So these assignment tags here, these are unique to the user. So now we have the exact same control. It's running every single month. It will be sent out on the 1st of every single month. One will go to Shanna because she's supposed to do it for company 100. Another one will go to me because I'm supposed to do it for company 300. Again, there's room for a lot of flexibility here. You can also work in teams, or we call it in user groups as well, and that's also possible to define that here. But in essence, it's possible to assign a control to one or multiple assignees. The final section here, again, where we have defined the basics, we have the name detail, we have the scheduling, we have who is supposed to do it, and now, well, what's actually supposed to be done? And we see this a little bit as a questionnaire. So what you see here is this little gray area here is basically what we say is a little bit as a questionnaire, and these elements here that we have on the right side, these are answering options. So what we have here is at least the first three are how a standard control when you are starting up with Impero actually looks. So we have a radio button. So basically these are from, you can select one option. So in this case, confirm or not confirm. But basically, once again, each of these elements here will have a title. They will also have some in-depth instruction on what I'm actually supposed to do. Maybe even a link to a SharePoint or similar. Now this is just an example of a process manual. We can even do an attachment of say, well, what does good actually look like? Or maybe even as in this example here, we have a bank reconciliation template that I can download and fill and then maybe re-upload. Now this is required. So in order to submit this control here, you have to answer either confirm or not confirm. But then we might want some documentation in return. And for this, not to be confused with the attached file that we have here, we have an attached file element. So this is actually, as you can see here on the little icon, what we have beneath here. So this is please attach supporting documentation. Again, we could do an in-depth instruction on what do we actually need and where can you actually find it. Again, it's required, but it's actually also based on a condition that we would only show or make it possible for the control performer to actually submit this control here if they up here in confirm that the control activity has been performed actually answered confirm. So this way we can basically tailor our control and guide our control performers throughout our control and say, well, if you say, yeah, I have done this, then you must also have some documentation, and I want to see that. And maybe we have an optional comment field if you say confirm, but we might also have a required comment field if you say that you do not confirm. Then we have a basic self-evaluation here at the end. I'll not go in detail with that today. So what actually happens is, and I will just do this here in a preview, is that, well, on the 1st of February, I'll receive an email, I'll click on a link, I'll go to a page that looks more or less completely like this one here. The assignee tags will of course also be available. So for me, it would state company 300 Germany over here in the menu as well. So what I'll then do is that, of course, I have my title, description, and then I basically have the last part we did on the design. So if I say confirm here, then I'll be asked to support or to attach some supporting documentation. I can do that by browsing, drag and drop in this field here, or even do a screenshot and paste that in this field here as well. Then I can do some additional comments, and I can say, well, I rate this as effective. And then all I have to do, of course, I can't do this in a preview, is to actually submit my control. So for the control performers, it's actually only the last part here that applies for them. So they'll receive an email, click on a link, do whatever. They will actually be guided through here on the screen, hit submit, and they will be received with a congratulations on completing your control. And then that's basically it. Of course, you might have some that say, yeah, but we have a shared service, or we work within a team, so we are actually in charge of a lot of controls. And to sort of solve that, then you can actually provide your users with a login just as I have here, but you don't need access to any data. So basically this will be completely blank, but you will have access to your pending actions. So essentially I could just click here and then I'll have a view of all the actions that has been assigned to me, but that I haven't yet submitted. So if we, for instance, just take a bank reconciliation here, well, then I can do just as in the preview before, say confirm. Now I hit print screen on my keyboard. I can paste that in here, and I can say effective, submit, and then that's basically it. It'll be removed from my task list, and that's it. So of course, there's a bit of work involved in actually getting these tasks defined in Impero, but once that is done, then it's very easy for the control performers to actually work with Impero.
Brilliant, thank you, Morten. So yeah, really, you can automate your processes and your tasks by basically underpinning it with a workflow, assign roles, responsibilities, very clear instructions of what needs to be done. And from an end user perspective, really simple. You receive an email where you click on a link and you perform, you submit your control, and you go back to your day-to-day life. So we now sit and we have sent out all of these controls. That's all good and fine. Now we want to make sure that they have actually been performed. Is there an easy way to monitor that that has actually happened?
Yeah, so the way we do that is, of course, well, it's through our reports that we have here. We have a few different reports, but what we'll focus on here today is what we call the status report. So we'll just do a country report, so basically a predefined report. I'll show you what we have done. So essentially here, this report, every time I run this, then it will basically show me the previous month. So now we are in January, and this is why by default it would display December 2021 here on my screen. When next week we jump into February, then it will automatically just show me January 2022. Of course, I can adjust up here if needed, but this is why the periods on the controls are quite important, because then it doesn't really matter on when they're actually due, because now we know they're all relating for December 2021, for instance. Now what we see here, has been sent out 29 controls, 22 of them has been completed, leaving us with 7 overdues. And because we actually distinguish between whether a control has been completed before or after the due date, then our on-time rate here is 72%. So here is actually when our tags is quite important, because what you see right here is actually only possible because we have tagged our controls with a given country. It could also be, well, I actually want to see this based on company instead. Then I could also do that. It's the exact same data that we're seeing. It's about just being reorganized here on my screen. Of course, in a chart like this, we can only look at one item at a time. So in order to actually being able to look at multiple times, multiple elements here at one, we actually have this table below here where we can actually define that I want to see my data split on country, then on company, let's just remove program here, and then on control and who's actually responsible. So what I see here is, for instance, if we take Denmark as an example, then I can see, okay, within Denmark, we have company 100, 200, 300, 400. And within company 100, it's the bank reconciliation, and it's Shanna and Morten who are supposed to do it. Shanna is still missing. There are 2 items here that are overdue. We can click these and we can reassign them to someone else or send a manual reminder if needed. So once everything is set up, this is basically where all of the maintenance, all of the following up will happen. We can reassign and send reminders if needed.
Thank you. So you've talked a bit about the daily housekeeping. How do we make sure that we reassign controls in an easy way? But as we all know, there are work to do around systems and solutions, so you need to move responsibilities, etc. It may be that colleagues join, it may be that colleagues resign. How can we do that in an easy way?
Yeah, so basically these actions here are controls that has already been sent. So if I reassign these, I'll only reassign these 2 actions here. If Shanna is still on the control for next month, then we will send a new one to her. So in order to actually make a bit more of a permanent change, it will have to be updated on the control, basically on the assignment section as you saw before. But it might be that, well, one user is actually responsible for multiple controls. So in order to actually change that, then we've enhanced our user management module here. And I'll just use myself as an example. But if you are either an admin or a user admin, you can do this on every single user within your environment. So what I can do is that I can see I am a part of 3 groups. I'm assigned as a performer or review on 16 controls. I have access to 7 control programs, etc. It's the same workflow for each of these elements here. So I'll just show the direct control assignments here as an example. So it might be that, well, these 2 and this one, and let's just say these here, they are no longer my responsibility. It's actually Shanna who is supposed to take over. So of course I could remove myself if needed. That could be if we terminate a company, something like that. But I can also replace and say now it's no longer Morten who's responsible. It's actually Shanna. And just like that, I have been replaced on all 5 controls in one click. You could of course do all of them at once, but it makes things a little bit easier.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Morten. So this was a high-level introduction to how Impero can basically help you strengthen your compliance processes so you can get off to a good start here in 2022. As I was saying, it's a high-level intro. So our next webinar, which is on the 9th of February at let's see, 9:30 Central European time, you can get a detailed, more technical understanding of the risk management module. So we hope that you found this helpful today, and we welcome you to our next webinar. So thank you for today, everyone.